7 episodes ago, you showed up. I do not know exactly what brought you here. Maybe you were in a job that was slowly shrinking you, and you could not explain why. Maybe you had just left something that cost you more than you let on. Maybe you were in the middle of a negotiation you did not know how to have, or in a room that started to turn a color that you did not have a word for yet, or in a career that looked fine from the outside and felt like a ceiling from the inside. Whatever it was, you showed up and you stayed. I want to say something about that before I say anything else. Staying was not passive. Every episode asked something of you. Episode 3 asked you to sit with your fury long enough to let it tell you something. Episode 5 asked you to walk into an interview like someone evaluating, rather than auditioning, which meant overriding a reflex that had been protecting you for years. Episode 6 asked you to test the room before you gave it your yes. Episode 7 asked you to say the number. That is not easy work. And you did it anyway. So before I ask you one more thing, I want to acknowledge that. Here's what I gave you this season. I gave you language for what had been happening to you. The flattening, the cardigan, the rooms that color themselves green until the day that they do not. The fury that is not a character flaw, but data. The values you thought you had until you excavated the ones you actually live by. The 3 questions that tell you whether you owe the room an apology or an answer. The offer that is almost never final, just an opening move. I gave you all of that because I lived the cost of not having it. Because I spent years in rooms that were using me in ways that I didn't have the words for. Because I didn't negotiate. Because I apologized for existing. Because I softened my ideas before I even said them. And I called that being professional. I called it being a team player. I called it being grateful. You know what I was doing. Because you've done it too. At the end of episode 7, I told you that we were going to talk about what happens every other day of the year. Not the negotiation, not the interview, the 250 some odd days where you're just in the room, doing the work, showing up in meetings, writing the email, following up, asking to be heard, trying not to disappear while calling it professionalism. That is what this episode is. I told you I would give you the language. And here it is. I'm Sarah Caminiti, and this is episode 8 of The Career Strategist, and this is the last episode of the season. Here's something that happens in meeting rooms every single day. Someone has an idea. A real one. The kind that shifts the direction of a project or solves the thing that everyone has been circling for 20 minutes. And they introduce it like this. This might be a dumb question, but, or I could be totally off base, and feel free to ignore this, but, or, sorry, can I jump in? Or, I just want to add. Yeah, the idea lands. It's good. The room hears it. And then 10 minutes later, someone else picks it up, says it back at full volume with no qualifier, no apology, no permission asked, and the room credits them. Not always because the idea was stolen. Sometimes that does happen, but not always. A lot of the time, the room simply heard the volume before it heard the idea. And that matters. Because this is not just a confidence problem, it is a language problem. And language problems have language solutions. The words you put in front of your idea act like a volume knob. They tell the room how seriously to take what follows. And most people are turning their own volume down before they've said a single thing. I might be wrong, but what that signals is, feel free to dismiss this. I just want to add, what this signals is, what I'm about to say is minor. It's supplementary. It's optional. Oh, so sorry. Can I jump in? What this signals is, I need permission to participate. You need permission in a meeting that you were invited to, in a conversation where your contribution is presumably why you are there. Does this make sense? At the end of something that was already completely clear. What this signals is, I do not trust what I just said. I do not trust that it can stand on its own. One that I say way too often when I finish something. I have no clue if that made any sense. Why? Why? None of these are moral failures. They're habits. They're hard habits to break. And most of them started as survival strategies. You learned to soften yourself so the room would not perceive you as a threat. And the hard truth is that often works. The room does not perceive you as a threat. It also does not perceive you as authoritative. In a lot of rooms, those two things are closer together than they should be. So, what can we control? The language. So let's fix the language. I want to give you specific swaps, not vague principles, posturing, not a mindset shift, just words. I think maybe we should, that one gets thrown in the garbage, and it becomes, what I'd recommend is, I just think, that one becomes, what I think is, that one matters. The content does not change. You just removed the word just. Same idea. Different signal. So sorry, one more thing. That one becomes one more thing. Can I push back on that? That one becomes, I see it differently. I feel like maybe. No. That one becomes, my read on this is, and then the fave. Does this make sense? Becomes, here's why that matters. Every phrase that we're swapping this for does the exact same thing. It delivers the idea without apologizing for having it. The content does not shift, but the apology disappears. And I want to pause on the word just for a second because it is everywhere. And most people don't even hear it anymore. I just want to check in. I just had a quick thought. I'm just following up. I just wanted to ask, take it out. Take it out every time. Because the sentence is stronger every single time. You are not just checking in. You are checking in. You are not just following up. You are following up. You are not just asking. You are asking. Let the sentence stand. And then there's sorry. Sorry is appropriate when you have done something wrong. When you have not done anything wrong, sorry is not politeness. It is often a power transfer. Sorry for the delay needs to become, thanks for your patience. Sorry to bother you becomes, thanks for making time. Sorry, one question becomes, One question. Same intention, different dynamic. You are no longer asking for forgiveness for taking up a sliver of space. You are participating. That's why you're there. And I want to give you one practical experiment here because otherwise this stays conceptual. And if you've learned anything from this series, it is that conceptual strategy tips and tricks drive me up the wall. In your next meeting, find one moment where you would normally qualify and do not. Where you would usually say, I could be wrong, but just start the idea. Where you would wait for a cleaner opening, go first. Where you would soften the point, let it land cleanly. One moment. Then write down what happened. Because the room is not reacting to a new you. It is reacting to a clearer signal from the same you. The authority was already there. The volume changed. Now let's just name something directly before we move on. The research on women in professional settings shows the same penalty for directness that we talked about in episode 7 with negotiation. Women who speak with the same directness as men are more likely to be rated as aggressive, less likable, harder to work with, not by outliers, on average. Documented, repeated, studied. So when I give you these swaps, I want to be very clear about what they're designed to do. My read on this is doing some of the same work as given the complexity of what you're describing from episode 7. Both are grounded, both are composed, both position the speaker without turning the room into the decider of whether she's allowed to have a view. The room responds differently to, here is what the data suggests, than to, I feel like maybe, even when the actual insight underneath is identical. Incorporating feelings changes things. That is real. And this is not about shrinking. It is not about making yourself palatable to people who will be uncomfortable with your authority no matter what you say. Those people exist. No amount of perfect wording will satisfy them. This here is for the rooms where framing matters. The rooms where how you say it determines whether the thing you know is even allowed to land. Navigating a system is not selling out. Navigating a system is not being hyper-negative. Navigating a system is surviving long enough to change the system. And the people who are going to change how these rooms work are the people who are still in them. I want to ask you something, and I need you to actually answer it. Don't move past it. Don't file it away for later. Sit with it. You have the language now. You can read a room before you commit to it. You can evaluate whether an employer is worth your yes. You can name your worth and say the number and hold the deflection without backing down. You know what it costs to stay in yellow while telling yourself it is green. You know what your ideas sound like at full volume. So why are you still accepting less? I'm not asking that to be hard on you. I am asking it the same way I would ask a friend who had every tool she needed and was still standing in the doorway, wondering whether she was allowed to walk through. You are allowed. You have been allowed this whole time. But I think some of you are sitting with that question, and the answer underneath it is this. I don't know if I'm actually going to use any of this. I have the tools. I'm not sure I'm ready. And let me just name what is underneath that, because it's not a competence problem and it's not a knowledge problem. That answer is one that I used many, 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 many times. I'm not sure I'm ready. But hey, you just finished 7 episodes of some of the most specific, usable career strategy tips and tricks that I know how to give. The problem is not that you do not know what to do. The problem is that doing it might cost you something. A relationship. A version of yourself that other people are comfortable with. The job you have. The peace that comes from not rocking a boat that never really felt like yours in the first place. Those fears are real. I'm not going to pretend that they're not. I do not know your situation. I am not in your room. But I do know this. The person who started this season is not the same person listening right now. You cannot unknow what you know. You cannot unflatten yourself back into the shape that fits those rooms. You named your values. You said your worth out loud. You practiced the deflections until they stopped feeling like somebody else's script. You heard your own voice at a different volume. You have been building something. You have been building the version of you that's been inside this whole time. And that someone deserves a life that matches. When I say stop accepting less, let me be specific about what I mean by less. Because stop accepting less is the kind of phrase that sounds great and stays abstract if nobody pins it down. I do not want this to stay abstract. I want you to hear it, and I want you to think of a specific room, a specific number, a specific relationship, a specific conversation that you've been putting off. When I say less, I mean less in your salary. You have the deflection playbook now. You have the language for when the offer comes. You practice saying the number. And I think some of you are still waiting to feel like a master negotiator before you try. You do not have to be. You just have to ask. 6 words changed one of my offers by $30,000. Is there any wiggle room? That was it. I was not fearless. I was not polished. I was not executing some genius strategy. I just had this blip of a moment where I was honest enough for long enough to ask. And that matters. If they move the number, great. If they come back and act like they're the ones who made it happen, great, fine. Let them take the credit. If they come back and say, your negotiation tactics had nothing to do with the salary offer I'm about to give you, who cares? You still got the number. You got it because you asked. They would have nothing to come back with if you didn't ask. When I say less, I mean less in how you're spoken to. You built the swaps. You know what claiming language sounds like, and you know what handing away language sounds like. You know what it sounds like when someone is speaking to you from a rung they would not use with someone they respected. You see that now. What you do with it is yours, but you see it. When I say less, I mean less in your scope. You know when scope creep is not a coincidence. You know when your responsibilities have expanded, but the clarity has not. You know when people are quietly getting used to more from you without naming it, resourcing it, or compensating it. And you know the conversation that names it. That conversation may not fix everything, but that conversation matters because clarity matters. When I say less, I mean less in the room itself. Green, yellow, red. You have been running this assessment all season, whether you realized it or not. And if you're sitting in a room that's been yellow for longer than you want to admit, the room is not going to color itself. You do not need one more sign. You don't need one more weird interaction. You don't need one more week of telling yourself that it's probably fine while your body keeps disagreeing. You know. And when I say less, I mean less in the version of you that you perform. Episode 1 was about this. Who you are before anyone tells you who to be. The version of you that exists before anybody says anything, before the qualifiers soften the idea, before the thank you comes out, before you've even looked at the number, before you start managing everybody else's comfort, before they've had to manage 1 ounce of yours. That version of you has been getting clearer all season. She is not aspirational. She is who you actually are, and she's tired of waiting. And here's what I want you to hold on to when the moment comes and it feels so much bigger than you were prepared for. You do not have to have the perfect line. You do not have to have the best idea in the room. You do not have to know exactly how it's going to go. You just have to go first. Some of those moments will land exactly how you hoped, and some will not. Some situations will turn out to be workable. Some will not. And some things really are good enough. And that's a real answer too. And some things will look incredible on paper while your gut is screaming that something is off and you won't even be able to explain why. Just trust that. When that moment comes, I want you to come back to the 3 questions from episode 5. Was I respectful? Was I curious? Was I kind? If you can answer yes to those, then you showed up in a way that you should be proud of. The rest is not yours to carry. I want to touch on something unexpected that's been happening to me through this whole journey. Something that I didn't really plan on including in this episode, but I think that it's worth acknowledging. Because you may find that some of this work starts to bleed into your personal life. Because it has in mine. In ways that I don't have enough episodes to dig into all of it. I would have to rename the series if I did that anyway. But here's what I can tell you. Once you survive going first in one room, once you feel what it's like to ask for what you know you deserve and realize that the world didn't end, once you give yourself permission to exist fully in one corner of your life, it becomes very hard to keep accepting less everywhere else. It may not happen all at once. It certainly did not for me. I became someone I was proud of in my professional life first. Then I became someone I was proud of as a mom. And then I started to look around and realize that there were still so many other rooms where I was standing as small as I possibly could. So many places where I was not going first. So many places I was bracing myself. Where I was still confusing accommodation with peace. And I still have days, honestly more than I want to admit, where there is a voice inside that is saying, what if you just went back to how it was? Wouldn't that be easier? Wouldn't that be more comfortable for everyone? Yeah, maybe. But going back would mean disappearing again. Going back would be easier for other people. But going back would be devastating for me. And that is the shift. Once you let the light hit it, once you give language to the thing that your body has been carrying. Once you can see the less clearly, you cannot go back to not seeing it. You can ignore it. You can delay it. You can decide not to act on it yet, but you cannot unknow it. And that is why it gets messy. Making space for yourself is messy. It's inconvenient. It's emotional. It is hard to maintain. It is very easy to look at it and say, I am being selfish. And maybe sometimes you are. But I would still ask you the same 3 questions. Were you respectful? Were you curious? Were you kind? And if you can check those boxes, then what are you planning to apologize for? And even if the answer is complicated, even if it is not clean, and likely it will not be clean, I would ask you this. Who decided that your needs are the ones that always have to give? Everything I gave you this season was about navigating rooms that already exist. Other people's structures, other people's dynamics, other people's ceilings. I have not asked you the harder question yet. And that's, what if the next room is yours? What if the clarity you built this season is not just for surviving other people's environments? What if it's the foundation for building your own? What if the green room you keep looking for is not somewhere you find? What if it's something that you make? I don't know what that looks like for you. It might be a new role. It might be a conversation that changes the shape of the one that you're already in. It might be something bigger. A business, a pivot, a body of work, a podcast. A version of your life that is structured around your values instead of around someone else's comfort with them. I do not need to know what that room looks like for you, but you do. Or you will. There will be a moment where you stop asking only what you can tolerate and start asking what would actually fit. Because that is the real question now. Not just why am I still accepting less, but what would more actually look like for me? You have been building the tools to answer that question all season. You just had not been asked it yet. What would more actually look like for me? There you go. I just asked it. Before I close, I want to tell you what's coming next, because this season was never meant to be the whole story. No way. The next season will pick up exactly where this one leaves off. The rooms that push back when you stop shrinking. What happens to relationships, especially the ones that were built on the version of you that was easier to manage, when you start showing up differently? Difficult conversations. The ones where you've done everything right and the room still calls you too much. The difference between people who support your growth and the people who need to control it. And the question of how you lead, how you build teams and relationships and cultures from a place of clarity, instead of from the place of proving that so many of us have been operating from for years. There is more to say. I know that. This season gave you the foundation. Next season, we build on it. If you want to stay connected between now and then, please do. You'll always be able to find me on LinkedIn. I'm thinking about actually trying Instagram. We'll see how that one goes. But really, the big one is the newsletter. That is where all of the space series, that's where all of the essays associated with this whole season and all future essays will live. You'll see the ones that go along with episodes, and you'll see the ones that sometimes go a little bit further. And the link is in the show notes. That is where the conversation continues between seasons. And I want to say one more thing to you. One more thing. And I mean this. Thank you. For 7 weeks. For showing up every week and doing the work that was asked of you. For the practices you completed and the ones you're still building up to. For sitting with things that were uncomfortable and coming back the next episode anyway. For the moment in episode 7 when you wrote down the number that you actually want and felt something move in you. For the way that you now have to think about power and cardigans and power panics. For the meeting where you went first, even if you haven't done it yet. For the meeting where you will go first. Even if you do not do every exercise, you gave this work oxygen. You let it breathe. You let it reach you. That matters. And here's what I want to leave you with. You are not too much. You never were. You were in rooms that could not hold you. And for a long time, you made that mean something about you. This season was about undoing that lie. It was about helping you see yourself clearly enough that you stop negotiating against your own life before anyone else even gets the chance. That is the point. Not just confidence, not just sounding stronger in meetings, not just getting better at interviews or negotiation. Those things matter, but they are not the deepest point. The point is that you stop disappearing inside rooms that were never built with you in mind. The point is that you stop confusing self-erasure with professionalism. The point is that you stop calling it gratitude when it is actually diminishment. That is what taking up space means. That is the foundation. And now you know. So whatever comes next, whatever number needs to be said, whatever conversation is overdue, whatever room needs to be tested, left, or built, I hope you meet it from that place. Not from proving, not from apology, not from shrinking, from clarity. Because you deserve clarity. You deserve joy. You deserve calm. You deserve respect. You deserve kindness. And you deserve more. Not someday. Not once you've proven enough or waited long enough or made yourself small enough that no one can argue with the ask. Now. You deserve it now. You are supposed to take up space. That is not a revolutionary idea. It should not be a hard-won conclusion at the end of an 8-episode season, but here we are. And here you are. And the fact that you stayed means something. Because you are capable of so much more than you realize. And I think that you're starting to believe that. And that is the whole point. That has always been the whole point. So thank you. I'm Sarah Caminiti. This is The Career Strategist. And I'll see you next season.